All right, go ahead.
Judges is written thematically, not chronologically.
As in theme?
Yes.
Okay.
Not
So
in
right,
order.
it's written by theme, but it's not in a correct order.
I have to keep that in mind. All right, so we are on chapter 18. If I remember, someone said it was long. Yeah, it is pretty long. No breaks. Does anybody have break in theirs?
Mm-mm.
No.
All right, Kim, are you up to reading?
Yeah, I can do it. All right. Judges 18. The Danites steal Micah's idols. As has already been stated, there was no king in Israel at that time. The tribe of Dan was trying to find a place to settle, for they had not yet driven out the people living in the land assigned to them. So the men of Dan chose 5 army heroes from the cities of Zorah and Eshtaol, as scouts to go and spy out the land they were supposed to settle in. Arriving in the hill country of Ephraim, they stayed at Micah's home. Noticing the young Levite's accent, they took him aside and asked him, "What are you doing here? Why did you come?" He told them about his contract with Micah and that he was his personal priest. "Well, then," they said, "ask God whether or not our trip will be successful." "Yes," the priest replied, "all is well. The Lord is taking care of you." So the 5 men went on to the town of Laish, and noticed how secure everyone felt. Their manner of life was Phoenician, and they were wealthy. They lived quietly and were unprepared for an attack, for there were no tribes in the area strong enough to try it. They lived a great distance from their relatives in Sidon and had little or no contact with the nearby villages. So the spies returned to their people in Zorah and Eshtaol. "What about it?" they were asked. "What did you find?" And the men replied, "Let's attack. We have seen the land and it is ours for the taking. A broad, fertile, wonderful place, a real paradise. The people aren't even prepared to defend themselves. Come on, let's go, for God has given it to us." So 600 armed troops of the tribe of Dan set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. They camped first at a place west of Kiriath Jearim in Judah, which is still called the Camp of Dan. Then they went on up into the hill country of Ephraim.
What's
As they
verse
passed,
1?
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
So
okay.
I'm on verse 13.
13.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll remember to do that. As they passed the home of Micah, the 5 spies told the others, "There is a shrine in there with an ephod, some teraphim, and many plated idols. It's obvious what we ought to do." So the 5 men went over to the house, and with all the armed men standing just outside the gate, they talked to the young priest and asked him how he was getting along. Then the 5 spies entered the shrine and took the idols, the ephod, and the teraphim. "What are you doing?" the young priest demanded when he saw them carrying them out. "Be quiet and come with us," they said. "Be a priest to all of us. Isn't it better for you to be a priest to a whole tribe in Israel instead of just to one man in his private home?" Verse 20. The young priest was then quite happy to go with them, and he took along the ephod, the teraphim, and the idols. They started on their way again, placing their children, cattle, and household goods at the front of the column. When they were quite a distance from Micah's home, Micah and some of his neighbors came chasing after them, yelling at them to stop. "What do you want, chasing after us like this?" the men of Dan demanded. "What do you mean, what do I want?" Micah retorted. "You have taken all my gods and my priests, and I have nothing left." Verse 25. "Be careful how you talk, mister," the men of Dan replied. "Somebody's apt to get angry and kill every one of you." So the men of Dan kept going. When Micah saw that there were too many of them for him to handle, he turned back home. Then, with Micah's idols and the priests, the men of Dan arrived at the city of Laish. There weren't even any guards, so they went in and slaughtered all the people and burned the city to the ground. Verse 28. There was no one to help the inhabitants, for they were too far away from Sidon, and they had no local allies, for they had no dealings with anyone. This happened in the valley next to Beth Rehob. Then the people of the tribe of Dan rebuilt the city and lived there. This happened in the city next to Beth Rehob. Okay. So the tribe of Dan rebuilt the city and lived there. Verse 29. The city was named Dan after their ancestor, Israel's son, but it had originally been called Laish. Then they set up the idols and appointed a man named Jonathan, son of Gershom and grandson of Moses, and his sons as their priests. This family continued as priests until the city was finally conquered by its enemies. So Micah's idols were worshipped by the tribe of Dan as long as the tabernacle remained at Shiloh. Interesting.
We're learning a lot more about Dan.
So this Jonathan that they appointed to be their priest, Jonathan, grandson of Moses.
Okay, there's a note in Worsby on this. It says in chapter 18, verse 30, Jonathan is identified as the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, which is impossible since Gershom was the son of Moses and didn't belong to the tribe of Manasseh. You can check it in Exodus 2, verse 22, and First Chronicles. Angie disappeared. First Chronicles 23, 14 and 15. It says a Levite would come from the tribe of Levi. The addition of the letter N, which is like Nun, N-U-N in Hebrew, to the name Moses would change it to Manasseh. So it must have added a letter at some point here. Let me check on Angie. Oh, hang on here. Oh, she's in there multiple times. That's the problem. Okay. So this letter was added in the Hebrew original. The nun is found above the line. Showing that the letter was added to the text later. Hebrew scholars believe that a scribe, zealous to protect the good name of Moses, changed the text so there wouldn't be an idolater in Moses' family. The scribe apparently forgot about Aaron. So they're saying that a scribe apparently, there she's back in. A scribe apparently added a letter to make it a relative of Moses, but they don't think it was because it doesn't make sense. All right, Cindy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, 18:2. On the migration by the tribe of Dan to a new territory. Dan was an example of tribal idolatry. 18:5. Please inquire of God. The passage does not say if the Levite did in fact seek God's counsel before giving reassurance in verse 6. The Danites should have prayed to seek God's counsel before 1, making the trip, and 2, consulting a disobedient priest as one would an oracle. 18:7. Laish, known also as Leshem in Joshua. This was a secluded, rich land. 18:14-26. The Danites seized the idols of Micah by force, probably because they believed those false idols were the source of power to give them the land they have found. The apostate Levite, who had served Micah as priest, sold himself out again to be a priest for the Danites, who were not bothered by his defection, but rather believed in his spiritual power. 1829, name of the city, Dan. This was in the northernmost extremity of the land of Canaan. Hence, the origin of the phrase, quotes, from Dan to Beersheba, as indicating the land from north to south. 1830, the son of Manasseh. Some manuscripts say son of Manasseh, others say son of Moses, which may be more probable, as Gershom was a son of Moses, a reference in Exodus. This idolatrous priestly service continued until the captivity. This is most likely one, the captivity of Israel by Assyria in 722 BC, or if not, two, the Philistine captivity of the ark from Shiloh.
Is that a contradiction to what you read then, Christy? That Gershom is actually a son of Moses?
Well, what we're reading is saying that it is, but
Yeah.
but what Worsby said is it's not likely. And then I wonder, because multiple times in our studies, we have also heard them say that they might say so-and-so is the grandson or son, meaning the line. But
Yeah.
the Levite, that still wouldn't make sense though, because the Levite line came from Aaron, is what Worsby's saying, and that's true, which is Moses's brother, right? Or cousin, brother. Was Aaron Moses' brother or cousin? Whatever. There's no way the line went to Moses. If he was a priest and a Levite, it had to come from Aaron. So this whole
Oh.
passage is contradictory.
Huh. Yeah.
Which feeds even in more why Dan is not included in Revelation in the list of the tribes. I mean, they just are disobedient.
Well, Exodus 18:3 says, earlier Moses had sent his wife Zipporah and his two sons back to Jethro, who had taken them in. Verse 3, Moses' first son was named Gershom. For Moses had said when the boy was born, quotes, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land.
The
The
Gershom
second
would,
son,
go ahead.
well, it just says his second son was Eleazar. I don't know.
But for them to be in the priestly line, they had to come from Aaron.
Right.
So this Jonathan that was a Levite priest could not have come from Moses. He would have had to come from Aaron if he was actually a priest. I
Well,
think that's what Worsby was saying.
my Bible didn't say that's that it said they appointed Jonathan as a priest. Was he
Maybe
from
he
the
wasn't truly from the priestly
lineage
line.
of the Levite?
Where did it say he was? Did it say anywhere that he was a Levite? That's a good question. A Levite would come from the tribe of Levi. So did it, and it said that he did not belong to the tribe of Manasseh. So
Back in 17:9, they said, where are you from? Micah asked him. He replied, I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah.
okay, so where's Manasseh coming in then?
Okay, well, good. So it does say he's a Levite.
He said
It
he
did
was. He
yesterday.
identified himself as a Levite.
Yeah, yeah.
This is really interesting. Well, let's see what our other commentaries say, I guess.
I think I just have one more thing.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Eight, that's all right. 1831, the house of God was in Shiloh. The ark of God was far away from them, so they justified their idolatry by their distance from the rest of Israel. This caused perpetual idolatry for many generations. That's it.
Because they were only allowed to have one place where they went to worship and do sacrifices, remember? Because when they were on the other side, the Transjordan, remember they set up their own little thing there. All right, let's see what Worsby says. Here's an overview. God should have been the king of Israel and his word, the law that governs society. But the people preferred to do their own thing. If the people had forsaken their idols, and if the elders of Israel had consulted God's law and obeyed it for God's glory, Israel could have been governed successfully. Instead, every man did what was right in his own eyes, and the result was a society filled with competition and confusion. And he's marking 21:25 as a reference for that in his own eyes. So I'll bet we see that again. Yeah, we do. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Consider the tribe of Dan as they sought to better their situation in the land of Israel. Covetousness in verses 1 and 2. The tribe of Dan descended from Jacob's fifth son, born of Rachel's handmaid, Bilhah, in Genesis 30, 1-6. So Dan, that's interesting. Dan was from Bilhah. Though not a large tribe, Numbers 139, it was given choice territory when the tribal boundaries were assigned in Joshua 19:40-48. The Danites, however, weren't able to defeat and dispossess the enemy, Judges 134. So they decided to go north and relocate. Most of the other tribes were able to conquer the enemy, dispossess them, and claim their land. But the Danites coveted somebody else's land instead and took it in a violent manner. Okay, so that tells me they were willing to fight. Remember, we talked before about them at the Gaza Strip not willing to fight? But here it says they took it in a violent manner, so they were willing to fight. It wasn't the choicest land, probably, in my opinion. The Lord had assigned the tribal allotments under the direction of Joshua with the help of Eleazar, the high priest, and the elders from the tribes in Joshua 19:51, as he also did with the nations in Acts 17:26. That's interesting because I don't think I ever picked up on that in Acts. So he did with the tribe. So he did with the tribes. God put each tribe just where he wanted it. For the tribe of Dan to reject God's assigned territory and covet another place was to oppose his divine will. But isn't that what causes most of the trouble in our society today? Instead of submitting to God's will, people want what somebody else has, and they'll do almost anything to get it. James 4:1-3. The corruption that's in this world is fed by evil desires. 2 Peter 1-4. Whether it's producing pornography, selling dope, or promoting gambling, money-hungry people cater to human desires and end up making money and destroying lives. Thanks to the power of modern media, especially television, the advertising industry creates in people appetites for all sorts of exciting products, services, and experiences. Therefore, people go out and spend money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people who really don't care. But this is the cycle that keeps business going. Okay, there's a little tag here. He says, in writing this, I have no intention of indicating the entire advertising industry. Oh, indicting the entire advertising industry. Advertising platforms are a valuable service when it tells us where to find products and services that we really need. It's when advertisers promote unhealthy desires by creating images that appeal to the baser instincts of the human heart that I part company with them. Pride, covetousness, and competition for the status aren't the healthiest motivations for people who want to build strong homes or a safe and just society. It's good to have things that money can buy if you don't lose the things that money can't buy. By the way, our advertising 70% pharmaceuticals.
I was just thinking that too.
Read that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, which part? The end?
Yeah, that last quote or whatever it was.
Yeah. So it's good to have the things that money can buy if you don't lose the things that money can't buy. Kim, what were you saying?
Oh, as you were reading that, that's what I was thinking. Oh, pharmaceuticals on commercials.
70% of advertising is pharmaceuticals, and I hope RFK
Yeah,
gets rid of it. They don't do it they don't do it in Europe.
I'll be so glad to see them go.
They spend I think 15 times more money on that than they do research.
Wow.
So, what do you think they're doing?
Those girls yesterday at lunch were telling me about a drug for what is it when you lose your bone mass?
Osteoporosis. Mm-hmm.
And it's causing people's bones to break.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Wow.
And I didn't write down the name of it, but I'm not going to take
It does, I know, and my doctor's wanting me to go on that. He keeps talking about it. I'm like, no.
Get your minerals, and it will clean up 97% of the issues you have.
So, like the colloidal minerals.
Like the 87 minerals that you find in your Celtic salt or in the humic acid drops. I mean, Celtic salt you would have to take it throughout the day. If you don't want to mess with that, then get the humic acid drops and just dose once a day. But it's 97% of the base of people's issues is the lack of them because we're not getting in our food. And then our over-the-counters and our pharmaceuticals and the food that we are eating depletes our body of them. Okay, so once people get an appetite for something more, it's difficult to control them. So the elders of Israel should have put a stop to the men of Dan as they abandoned God's assigned place and headed north to kill innocent people and steal their land. But covetousness is strong, and once people get an appetite for something more, it's difficult to control them. That's true. Like, just look at people who have power. People have a lot of money. Like, they just want more. Most of them, not all of them. Ungodly counsel, verses 3-6. It was Jonathan's dialect that attracted the attention of the 5 spies because he didn't speak quite like a man from Ephraim. When they asked what a Levitical priest was doing in a private home in Ephraim, a very good question, by the way, 1 Kings 19:9-13, he told them the truth. He was hired to do the job. Since somebody else was paying the bill, the spies thought it was permissible to get spiritual counsel from Jonathan. Wonder if Jonathan lied and said he was a priest from the Levitical line. Since somebody else was paying the bill, the spies thought it was permissible to get spiritual counsel from Jonathan, and he told them what they wanted to hear. We have another note here. The fact that Jonathan's words came true doesn't absolve either him or the spies from being involved in activities outside the will of God. Jonathan's prophecy came true because the Danites were strong and the people of Laish were weak and unprotected. If the tribe of Dan had really wanted God's counsel, they would have consulted with the high priest. But they were actually rejecting God's counsel by refusing to remain in the land that he had assigned them. Therefore, it wasn't likely God would have revealed anything to them. referring to John 7:17. It's kind of like we want God, but we don't want the real God. We want the God that we want. Verses 14 through 26.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Go ahead.
you were talking about Jonathan again.
Yeah.
And my Bible says, I don't know where you saw where he was from, Lori. My Bible says this, then in it's verse 30. Then they set up the idols and appointed a man named Jonathan, son of Gershom and grandson of Moses, and his sons as their priests. And this family continued as priests until the city was finally conquered by its enemies. But it never says where Jonathan was from.
I think Lori was reading out 17, weren't you?
Yeah, if you look at 17:9,
Oh,
but it was later, somewhere
But
in
that's-
17:9 or 17 where they actually said his name was Jonathan yesterday. Does
I
anybody?
thought it was
1820
I thought that
said it
was
was his name.
I thought that was a different priest.
1820 was his name.
But I'm wondering if
identified
it was two different people.
Yeah, that's what I think,
Maybe.
Cindy. I don't think they're the same priest.
That would be a good point. That would clear it up. And well, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because it still says that he was a priest in the line of Moses. Moses wasn't a Levite. So he couldn't be a priest and be in the line of Moses.
Yeah, they're not the same guy.
No, at the end of 18, though, Kim,
Yeah.
it says Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons. He would not have been a Levite if he was the son of Moses. So that we do still have the confusion, even if it is a different person.
I see what you're saying.
I thought yesterday, though, somewhere he was named Jonathan in what we
Yeah.
read yesterday.
18,
No, 17 was yesterday.
we identified him in 1820 yesterday.
Well, didn't Cindy read in Leviticus that Moses' first son's name was Gershom?
Yeah, but they're saying that he couldn't have been Gershom's son because he said he's from the line, he's a Levite. It'd have to be Aaron. And so they think someone added the nun, N-U-N, mark to change the meaning of the scripture at some point.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm trying to find the name of this priest that Micah hired. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. It says in 17:7 there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite. But I don't think it identified him. I think he's not identified until 18. Because he says, I have a Levite as a priest. All right, 14 to 26. On their way to capture Laish, the people of Dan paused at Micah's house in Ephraim. The spies told the men that Micah had a wonderful collection of gods, hinting, of course, that the collection would be valuable to them as they traveled, warred, and established their new home. While the armed men stood at the gate of the city, the 5 spies who knew Jonathan invaded the shrine and stole the gods. When the 5 men, with their religious loot, arrived back at the city gate, the priest was shocked to see what they had done. And here's another note. 4. As serious as their crimes were, I confess I can't help smiling as I envision 5 brave men stealing gods that can't even protect themselves. The scriptures that come to mind are Isaiah 40 and then 44 as well as Psalm 115. These 5 men are standing there in charge. Okay, so, but the Danites silenced him by hiring him. Since he was a hireling, Jonathan was ready for a better offer. The Danites not only broke into Micah's shrine and stole his gods, but they stole his chaplain. Not a bad day's work. The Danites put the women and children in the front, since that was the safest place, because any attacks would come from the rear. By the time the Danites had traveled some distance, Micah discovered that his shrine was out of business, having neither gods nor priest. So he called his neighbors together, and they pursued the invaders. After all, a man must protect his gods. It was useless, since the Danites outnumbered him and were too strong for him. Micah and his neighbors had to turn around and go home, defeated. Micah's sad question, "What else do I have?" in verse 24, reveals the folly and the tragedy of religion without the true and living God. Idolaters worship gods they can carry, but Christians worship a God who carries them. Then the next section covers 7 through 13 and 27 through 29. The 5 spies had traveled 100 miles north from their encampment to Zorah, and from at Zorah to Laish, or Leshem. I guess that's the same thing. Leshem. A town inhabited by the Sidonians about 30 miles east of the Mediterranean Sea. These were a peaceful people who minded their own business and had no treaties with anybody. They were unsuspecting and secure and prosperous. An isolated people who were a perfect target for the warlike tribe of Dan. With 600 men, plus their women and children, verse 21, they marched north and captured Laish, killing all the inhabitants and burning the city. Then they rebuilt it and proudly called it Dan, after the founder of their tribe. Unfortunately, what Jacob prophesied about the tribe of Dan came true. Genesis 49:17. I want to look that up.
You want me to look it up right now?
Yes, please. What did Jacob prophesy about Dan?
Genesis 4.
49:17.
Dan will be a snake beside the road, a poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse's hooves so its rider is thrown off. 49:17.
Yep. Wow.
He's a snake.
He's a snake in the
He's a
grass.
snake.
Someone has said that there are only 3 philosophies in life in today's world. The first one is what's mine is mine and I'll keep it. The second one is what's yours is mine and I'll keep it. I'll take it. I'll take it. And the third one is what's mine is yours, I'll share it. The Danites followed the second philosophy, and so do too many other grasping people. One of the current booming industries in the United States is the installing of security cameras in private homes. The number of shooting sprees in shopping malls and fast food restaurants has frightened many people into doing their shopping by telephone. The cover story of Time magazine for August 23rd, 1993 called the United States, America the Violent. We don't know how many people live in Laish, but the wanton murders of even a few hundred innocent people is a crime of gross proportions. I fear that we've been exposed to so much crime and violence in the media that this kind of news doesn't disturb us anymore. Yeah, I would agree. Look at our assassination attempts. Like, it didn't, it shocked us, but it didn't. We're seeing a new sort of violence, wrote author Beiser in Sports Illustrated in March 1st, 1976. It's being used not as a means to an end, but for recreational purposes, for pleasure. We might add that violence is also a means for making money, as both the movie makers and the television industry have proved. And then the last section here is 30 through 31. The tribe of Dan was the first tribe in Israel to officially adopt an idolatrous system of religion. Even though there was a house of God in Shiloh, they preferred their images and idols. And years later, when the kingdom divided, Jeroboam, the first of Israel, would set up golden calves in Dan and Beersheba, so the north and the south, and encouraged the whole nation to turn away from the true and living God. The account of Micah, Jonathan, and the Danites is more than a story from ancient history. It's a revelation of the wickedness of the human heart and the hopelessness of the human society without God. Our modern world has substituted idols for the true and living God and has devised its own humanistic religion, complete with priests. Our modern world has substituted idols for the true and living God and has devised its own humanistic religion, complete with priests, the experts who tell us that the Bible is wrong, but their way is right. But neither their idols nor their priests have any power against the violence of the human heart. When Dwight E. Eisenhower was president of the United States, he called a White House conference on children and youth, hoping to find solutions to the juvenile delinquency problem that was then plaguing the nation. I was supposed to attend that conference, but couldn't go because of family obligations. However, a friend of mine from Youth for Christ International attended and gave this report, and I paraphrase. I sat in the room for hours listening to psychologists and educators and criminologists talk about teenagers and how to help them, and I got sick of it. Finally, I asked for the floor and told them of our experiences in Youth for Christ, how delinquents had been changed by the power of the gospel. The room became very quiet, and then people got embarrassed and began to clear their throats and shuffle papers. The chairman thanked me for my words and immediately moved to the next item on the agenda. Then it hit me. They didn't want to hear. William Butler Yeats was right. The center cannot hold. The home, the ministry, and society are disintegrating before our eyes, and people don't want to hear the truth. That whether they want it or not, the world must be told that Jesus died for lost sinners and that the power of Christ can transform hearts, homes, churches, and society if people will only trust Him. Christ beats his drum, but he does not press men, said English preacher and poet John Donne. Christ is served with voluntaries. Are you available?
Yes, absolutely. As you're reading that, I'm thinking, I don't know that it's that the people there didn't want to hear. It's just, I think that it's just not going to be accepted throughout society. So, because there's just too many people that would just label it, religious movement. Like, I don't think a government program can be Christ-centered because our society just won't accept it.
Well, I think it's overwhelming. Like when you think, oh, how, looking at society now. Now, this was back in the 90s, maybe he wrote this. I don't know. I'd have to look. But, like when you look at society, it's overwhelming. Because I used to feel that way too. And then I realized that I just had to do what God was calling me to do, like do my part. And if true Christians all just do their part, it can have an impact. But we can't, one person, like to think of one person trying to do all of it. But I think too, like the other thing that happens is like as you truly share the gospel, as you truly are a Christian, you do influence people, and I think that seed does grow because, like this Bible study and all the people that all of you are a part of, like you will influence all your people, and so I do think that it can happen. But I think probably when he was standing there with them saying that, they didn't get it.
They were, I mean, it was like a gathering of government officials, right? Sounded
Well, it
like.
was, yeah, White House Conference for Children and Youth, find problems for
Yeah.
juvenile delinquency.
I just think our government's a long way from.
You can't govern and make laws. The Old Testament for like the Old Testament shows us like law, it doesn't work. We're not gonna, it's a heart issue. Like I think we still need we need laws because people aren't, their hearts are awful, but like if we're doing our job at being Christ to others, that's more effective.
I just almost think, though, that if our government would adopt one Christ-centered uh, program, like they just, okay, for example, they just created this one with Musk and Vivek, the,
Mhm. Dodge.
organi- organization gurus or whatever. So if they created something like that for, I don't know, whatever
You,
purpose,
you
it
still
would
have to have
change.
people. You still have to have people, though. The church is supposed to be doing that. The church
Yeah,
is that.
I think it would make it more recognized, though. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the implications would be, but I think society would open their eyes and be like, oh, well, our government's going to acknowledge, our God, and I can't see that happening because it's too diverse. It's just I don't know. It's just it's very, very complicated. And
The church itself needs to take that on. And I think like when you look at what happened down south, the church is what stepped up. The government failed, all these things failed. The church stepped up and is still stepping up to help those people, which is having the impact. I posted a video on it yesterday or the day before, I don't know. But like the church could do it.
Well, it used to be that way before all the government agencies.
well, yeah, maybe the government's what got in the way
The
of the
government's way
church.
too big. The government's way too big.
Yeah, I just feel like the church is, even though they're broad, the scope is the participation is narrow, and it serves a narrow uh, audience. I don't know the answer of how the church can broaden its audience,
Well, why do you think that it's narrow?
because the only people I think Christians gravitate toward other Christians, and that the programming and everything that's out there that is godly based is mostly um, the biggest audience are existing Christians, is
Because
why I'm saying.
this is what,
Well,
and
look at all the denominations.
yeah,
Yes, because it's so broad. It's just
but this is
it's
the issue. People think it's the church, like the building, but it's not the building. That's where we meet. It's individuals truly living and serving God and going into the world, into their place of influence and sharing the gospel, like being authentic though in their relationship, not just showing up to church on Sunday and being like, okay, I did my part, but like truly if you truly a Christian, then you love others. And the people in the world that aren't feeling loved, like our juveniles, I had been one of those juveniles, until someone, and they know, those kids know when someone loves them and when someone's fake. And
yeah.
and when someone shows up in their life that truly loves them and cares about them, they know it. And you can influence them, but it's the individual going into the world and then bringing them back into the church to grow and be discipled.
When I say the church, I mean the whole Christian movement, not
Yeah.
just the building. And I'm meaning, I just feel like it's too confined. But I think society confines it. And and I'm talking about myself too. I mean, and we are we allow that. We try not to. We try to, do little things and make a difference here and there, but
Let me read this little piece in my concordance. Worshipping images of God is not worshiping God, even if it resembles true worship in some ways. People repeat the same mistake today when they claim to be Christians without really believing in God's power or changing their conduct to conform to his expectations. Godliness cannot be merely a claim. It must be a reality in our motives and in our actions.
Yeah, true, authentic Christianity.
What did that girl, I just looked at this morning, that black girl, what did she say about that one quote she said about, man, I had to go back and look at it. She said she didn't know who she was talking to. I forget what
Was
she
it
said.
in that Instagram post?
In Jackie, what's her name?
Jackie Hill Perry.
Uh-huh.
I don't
But
know.
that one thing she said, it just was so somebody said truth,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mhm.
You
All right,
can't,
ladies. We're a little
can't.
over. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, well, I won't be here tomorrow, so it doesn't matter. You didn't finish Tony. Did you?
I didn't get to read Tony yet. No. I'll have to finish that tomorrow. Maybe there will be pearls of wisdom in that. All right. This concludes the reading of God's word for today. We'll pick back up tomorrow with Tony, and Lori will miss you.